It's good to be with everyone. I'm Reverend John Millspaw. I am invited here as president of the Unitarian Universalist Animal Ministry. I am a community minister in San Diego, working both for an organization called Farm Forward, which works against the factory farming of animals and for alternatives, and also for the San Diego Hunger Coalition.
And I'm Sarah Gibb Millspaw, and I am on the Pacific Western Region UUA staff and serve our 180 plus congregations and covenanting communities out in the West. And John and I have had the privilege of serving as co-ministers in the past of a congregation, but this is the first time in a little while that we've gotten to collaborate on a thing. So besides parenting and, life and all of that. So it's really a pleasure to get a chance to be with you.
Yes, thank you, UUMFE, for thinking of us and inviting us to be part of this event. So wanted to start with Chalice Lighting. We have some words from Adrienne Marie Brown, who is a Black feminist social justice facilitator, healer, and doula living in Detroit, who works on emergent strategy. She writes, "You are a miracle walking. I greet you with wonder. In a world which seeks to own your joy and your imagination, you have chosen to be free every day as a practice. I can never know the struggles you went through to get here, but I know you have swum upstream, and at times it has been lonely. I want you to know I honor the choices that you have made in solitude, and I honor the work that you have done to belong. I honor your commitment to that which is larger than yourself and your journey to love the particular container of life that is you. You are enough. Your work is enough. You are needed. Your work is sacred. You are here, and I am grateful." I also wanted to share these words brought to my attention by Sabrina Louise of UUMFE, which are a Thanksgiving blessing from the Jain tradition, offered to be used beyond that tradition, which might serve as grace for our meal, whether or not we have begun eating. Tonight, we give thanks for the many lives that have contributed to our lives. We also ask for forgiveness from the living beings that we have harmed, intentionally and unintentionally, in our food and other activities of our life. We give thanks for this meal and the people who have labored to harvest, process, transport, and prepare this meal for us. We thank all our teachers in ancient and modern times who have taught us lessons beneficial for life. We are grateful for our health and the opportunity to eat with others on this day. We aspire with compassionate hearts to use the energy that we gain from this meal and our friends to contribute to the peace and happiness of all living beings. We hope that all the people of the world will practice nonviolence and compassion whenever possible. We express our sorrow at the suffering of all the turkeys and the other animals that have died. May peace grow in ourselves and extend to all around us. So may it be. Amen.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Sabrina Louise, for offering that beautiful prayer. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing tonight. We will be having some time of breakout, like being at a dinner table with a bunch of different wonderful Unitarian Universalists and other adjacent folks. And we're going to have two different breakouts. The first one, I'll talk a bit about reframing the myth of Thanksgiving. and then we'll have a breakout about the meaning of Thanksgiving. And then the second, John will talk about reframing some of the food and the ways that we eat. And then you will have a breakout around that subject with a different group of people. So you'll get a chance to mill about to 2 different tables tonight. And we hope that we can use the power that we have with Zoom and this technology to do something that we wouldn't have been able to do before in this extraordinary time that we're in. So I want to talk to you about the Thanksgiving myth. I remember back in 2016 when the UUA passed a resolution about looking at the myth of Thanksgiving and really confronting it and inviting us into solidarity with the Wampanoag people in 2020, which is now for the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower's landing. And I have been so moved by what has come of that. Been so moved participating in Harvest the Power this past week, and especially the worships by Indigenous UUs and the worship led by Susan Frederick Gray, our president, and people who are Wampanoag, and all of the heart and the good spirit and soul that went into this time of reframing. I imagine that you have been moved by those times as well. And it's moving for me, not just as a white American UU and someone who was raised with these myths, but it's also moving for me as a descendant of 3 Mayflower passengers, and also the descendant of numerous settler colonists. And also meaningful for me as someone who, through my UU tradition, has become very committed to dismantling white supremacy in our tradition and in our culture. And holding those 2 things, being the descendant of the colonists and Mayflower people and being someone who is deeply committed to dismantling white supremacy, I haven't had that many opportunities to bring those things together. I've held them in tension for a very long time. And often that tension would come to the surface for me at Thanksgiving when this fictional story about my ancestors is getting trotted out to make Manifest Destiny A-OK, or to make it seem just fine and not strange at all that Europeans moved in and created the US as a white-founded and white-led nation. So this myth must be deconstructed, and we have done a lot of deconstructing of it. But what are we constructing in its place? I think that's something that we are working to live into. Susan Frederick Gray reminded us that actually this holiday came from Abraham Lincoln and unity after the Civil War, and not really this whole myth of the Wampanoag and the Puritans, the Pilgrims. But one of the things that we are also reminded of is the abundant presence of rituals of Thanksgiving and times of Thanksgiving in Wampanoag tradition, in other Indigenous traditions on these lands that have become the United States, and also in Puritan tradition itself. The times of Thanksgiving and prayer were abundant. Even my Jewish ancestors would say thank you to the Almighty every morning before even getting out of bed. This gratitude was built into the rituals of the tradition. Our ancestors of many different faiths and cultures knew the power of gratitude because they knew something that I think that we too often forget these days. They knew that they depended on something much greater than themselves, that they were utterly dependent, and that we are so interdependent as a result. So that's why they had times for rituals and times for giving thanks. And we too need to create intentional space for gratitude and humility and connection with the web of life. every day, and especially tomorrow. This is how I want to reframe Thanksgiving. And when I talk about gratitude, I'm not just talking about, hashtag grateful or hashtag blessed. I'm not talking about humble brags on social media. I'm talking about the kind of deep humility that comes from recognizing that we depend on so much more than we can control. And so much more than we can ever know we depend on every day. We are deeply dependent and deeply interdependent. And we can, in some ways, the coronavirus has been a wake-up call to this, because we can see how much our safety depends on other people's safety, and our practices depend on other people's practices. It's a little scary, isn't it? This interdependence thing, right? It is a little scary. I'm a practitioner of Joanna Macy's work that reconnects. And the work that reconnects is something that's also called despair work. It helps us find meaning and hope in the face of overwhelming collective challenges like climate change. It can be applied to racism. It can be applied to capitalism and its destruction. It can be applied to so many things. Like, how do we not just fall into despair when we're trying to create life-giving change? How do we live with hope? And the place that the work that reconnects always starts is with gratitude. Because giving thanks from a place that truly recognizes our interdependence is not only a way of facing the reality of our interdependence, it's also a way of living into our hope and our interconnection. So that's how I want to frame my Thanksgiving, with gratitude, with our UU7th principle, honoring the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. This year, my prayer is that we may learn to live like we truly depend on one another, and like others depend on us. And may we live with even greater love, and in so doing, foster loving transformation in the world. So I want to invite you into a time of gathering around the table with some others. And I'm going to share some slides here with some guidance for how we can be together. Just some basics to remind us of our best wisdom of how to be in groups together. So let me get the right screen here. Do you see slides? Yes?
No.
No, you don't see
Emails.
slides. All right.
Emails.
Emails. No.
We are grateful for second chances.
Not emails. There we go. All right. Now do you see slides?
Yes.
Okay,
Yay.
excellent. So I invite you in your small group to be wonderful. And that is trying to be non-judgmental, encouraging, accepting. We're talking about food, we're talking about racism, we're talking about white supremacy, we're talking about climate change, we're talking about all those things. So we can get kind of judgy in those spaces. So instead, let's be wonderful. When in doubt, turn to wonder. Be curious about one another and engage. I also invite us to be creative, to think outside the box, to push beyond unnecessary assumptions, to be culture aware, to recognize that we have many cultures in our space. We probably have even more than we know, and recognize our assumptions based on our own cultures and respect the diversity of cultural experiences here. I invite us to be kind. We are all imperfect. We're all learning. And we can also be kind to ourselves. When we're hurt, we can say, ouch. We can say, oops, if we accidentally hurt someone. We can be kind to one another and ourselves. I invite us to be present, to speak from our hearts and listen from our hearts. And I invite us to be open to growing and learning more about our community and how to live. So can we do that? Can we be wonderful, creative, culture aware, kind, present, and open? I invite you to like put your little icon of thumbs up or wave your hand or something like that. Yes, yes, I see a yes in the chat. Fantastic. Well, we will join in some breakout groups, and our wonderful tech assists are going to put the questions in the chat, but I will read them out loud to you so you can start pondering them. What parts of Harvest the Power have you attended in the last week? What has touched or moved you? What are you still processing? How are you framing or reframing Thanksgiving this year in your own mind and your heart? And what are you feeling grateful for? And I want to let you know that if your breakout group doesn't quite gel or work for you, or if you somehow end up all alone, just pop back into this room, just click leave the breakout room. You can be reassigned to a different one.
Good to have you back with us. I would invite you to put in the chat box a few words about how that was for you or anything that stood out from the conversation. And I'll read a few comments if anyone actually writes in the chat, which so far no one has.
Who will be first?
Who will be second and third? A wonderful personal experience. Fun, run out of time.
Go ahead. No, you go.
Needed more time. That's always good to hear. I was thrilled to learn this event is an intro to Unitarian Universalism and all of its wonders. It was nice to connect to distant people, met 3 lovely people, really liked connecting. Oh, there's a lot of comments now. Watermelon radishes. I've experienced those recently.
Yeah, and he didn't like them.
I did not. I did not. But
I liked them.
Yeah. You were sad to leave, just started talking and getting to know each other. Hope you can exchange your information. Really liked connecting with people from all over the country. There's a lot of unlearning to do. People speaking to appreciation for the technology that allows us to get together. We could have talked forever about connections to food and our desire to be more compassionate in our actions and connections to nature. That and the new expression active hope are a great segue to the next phase that we wanted to talk about. Ali invited this to all of us to join in this experience of a plant-based meal. And the question has come up, why plant-based? And there are a lot of reasons for that. You know, Unitarian Universalists care about a number of issues, which I would start listing, but then I would list so many. Why is eating plant-based one of the issues that many Unitarian Universalists care about? Some of this emerged through a 4-year process that I was a part of that in 2011 resulted in a statement of conscience. There were 400 Unitarian Universalist congregations that jointly participated in writing this statement of conscience, and it was called Ethical Eating, Food and Environmental Justice. And it went into many of the issues that our food connects us to. And in regard to plant-based eating, it acknowledged explicitly that some UUs feel that it's ethical to eat meat and animal products, and others do not. But the statement said there's one thing that we can all agree on, which is increasing the proportion of plant-based foods in our diets. So why are we concerned with that? In my experience talking to Unitarian Universalists, there are 3 main reasons that people are drawn to plant-based meals, and we'll be asking you about what drew you to this gathering and its plant-based meal shortly. People is one, animals is one, and the environment is one. So starting with people, every day more and more people are resolving to eat more plants and fewer animal products for their own health. Animal sourced foods are linked to heart disease and stroke and obesity and type 2 diabetes and various cancers and early mortality. Plant-based foods not only help prevent these diseases, they don't entirely prevent them, but they can often help, but they promote better health and longer lifespans. People are also eating for their own sake and for public health reasons to avoid antibiotics and foodborne illnesses. More than 70% of antibiotics in our country are fed to farmed animals, more than 70%, which is what's causing the growing epidemic of antibiotic resistance. According to the World Health Organization, antibiotic resistance is one of the biggest threats to global health and food security and development today. And activists have spoken for years of the pandemic risk of factory farming, which I'm hoping we're going to be waking up to more now that we're experiencing a pandemic and what that's really like and the fact that this can happen. We don't yet know the full history of the emergence of COVID-19, but with recent pandemic virus threats from influenza viruses such as H1N1, which is swine flu, or H5N1, which is bird flu, there is just no ambiguity. These viruses evolved on chicken and pig factory farms. Genetic analyses have shown that crucial components of swine flu emerged from a virus circulating in North American pigs. And it's complicated to talk about influenzas and the factory farming of chickens and poultry, but that's an even greater cause of pandemic threat than pig farming. So we're waking up to the pandemic threat posed by industrial animal farming. So more and more of us are choosing to eat plant-based because of the individual and collective benefits for people. Some of us are also motivated by the rights or welfare of non-human animals. There are more than 9 billion animals in the US that are killed for human food every year. That's more than 1 million animals an hour, around the clock, 24 hours a day, more than 1 million animals an hour every hour. And more than 99% of those farmed animals in the US live on factory farms. And I don't know if you've ever seen an image of a factory farm. I've had the distinct lack of pleasure of touring one in person. What characterizes factory farms is that to maximize profits, animals are confined in uncomfortably small spaces. So for example, egg-laying hens can be kept in wire cages that are too small for them to even spread their wings. Or if you get cage-free eggs, those are typically from animals that are kept maybe 10,000 in a shed, all milling around each other in chaos and confusion. Pigs are locked in metal crates, the width and length of their bodies, unable to even turn around. They can usually take a step or two forward and a step or two back, and that's about it. So it's no wonder that more than 3 out of 4 consumers say they're concerned about the welfare of animals raised for human food. And many people are turning to more plant-based food out of that concern. For me, it's a concern for other animals as sentient beings, as beings who are capable of suffering in ways that are similar to what I know it's like to suffer. I personally feel like for me to deprive another being of life and to put it through that experience just because it's one way that I can get nutrition when there are other ways I can get nutrition, it just doesn't add up. So there's the people reason, there's the animal reason, and then there's the reasons for the planet. There are just astonishing statistics about the impact of animal agriculture on our planet. For example, if cattle were their own nation, if cows were their own nation, they would be the world's 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases, which I find stunning. Any guess as to what % of our planet's total ice-free land is devoted to feeding or raising chickens, pigs, and cattle? What % would you guess of our ice-free land on the planet is devoted to raising or feeding chickens, pigs, and cattle? It's 30%. So without meat and dairy consumption, global farmland use could be reduced by more than 75%, an area equivalent to the US and China, the European Union, and Australia combined, and still feed the world. So I don't know what draws you to this plant-based event. I know what draws many of the Unitarian Universalists that I've spoken to over the years to trying more plant-based. But my guess is that for you, it has something to do with your values. Maybe it's the value that Sarah spoke to earlier of interdependence. Maybe it's compassion and respect for yourself and for others. My hope is that through our food choices, we're able to reflect on our values and live out our values. Oftentimes, the Thanksgiving meal for me growing up was seen as the pinnacle feast of the year. And for me, Thanksgiving is an opportunity to reflect my own values through what I'm eating. But actually every meal is the opportunity to do that. And I have to say there are ways in which I feel like my food expresses my values, and there are ways in which it doesn't. I feel like I'm still growing. I'm still on the journey. I'm still on the path. And so we're going to be asking you tonight how your food reflects your values and perhaps how you might still be aspiring in your food choices, what you feel like you're growing toward.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great segue to just talking about how we can be together in our next breakout. We're going to have a chance to talk about our values and our foods. And that is one place where I know we can have some very strong opinions. And so I just want to remind us about being wonderful and curious with one another, that we, none of us has all the answers, and we're not going to convince anyone of all the answers by being judgmental in our conversations. So let's be invitational instead, and invite us all into a space where we can be fellow people who are seeking to live out our ideals and our values in better and better ways through our food choices, given our circumstances and our lives as they are. So we're going to invite you into breakout groups for a second time. Thinking about what cherished values are on your plate tonight. So not just the foods, but the values that you're bringing to it, and or on your plate tomorrow. What cherished values are on your plate? And what are some of the foods that you eat that put you in touch with your identity, your people, your places, your values, your affirmations?
Your affiliations.
Your affiliations, yes, your affiliations. And describe the food that you would like to share virtually with the others at your table in your breakout room, were this a potluck. So we'll break again into groups. Those questions are in the chat for you, and we'll see you again in 15 minutes. I want you to do something that I've seen in the Zoom as a way of closing, which is to kind of pretend we're on Hollywood Squares, and put your hands out to touch the edge of the Hollywood Square that you're in. So you're kind of like holding hands with the next person. Here, John, you can put your hand on the other edge. There we go.
Oh, on this edge, okay.
Yeah. And I invite you to just look around at all the people here. You put yourself in gallery view so you can see everybody holding hands. And John and I will share with you a benediction from a contemporary UU minister, Sean Dennison, who's up in Rogue Valley, Oregon. And his book, Breaking and Blessing, it came out in 2020. It's available from the UUA bookstore. This is called Benediction. At this moment of ending, may there be a good word, a blessing, to help us remember what we have so often forgotten.
May the message we need be gently spoken and held in the spaces in our cells, the fibers that hold all we need to maintain, our gentleness, our courage, and our hope.
At this moment of ending, may the goodness we wish for ourselves and each other, for this community, ecosystem, planet, and stardust galaxy become such a part of us that we cannot tell where the blessing ends and we begin. Thank you for this time.